I'm Matt Vance, representing Mobrium today, and we're really excited for you to be here for today's monthly Mobrium webinar. We've got an incredible session planned. Travis, before we kind of jump into the topic formally, we had met, I think it's been maybe 2 years, or I think it was about 2 years at the Utah SHRM conference, WeCon, and he's doing some really impressive things over there with the Careers Launch Talent Group. And so we're excited to have him here. Just as kind of a note, a couple of housekeeping items. This event is SHRM PDC approved or eligible. So you'll get the activity code for this event as part of the follow-up email. It typically takes us about 48 hours to get that out because we do editing of the recording of this event to make it viewable on demand for those who weren't able to attend live. So watch for that email by Friday, and there will be a link to get the activity code so you can get credit for this. And then in today's webinar, we're going to be talking about a really important topic, the candidate experience gap, and you will learn about the importance of designing a better experience for the employees that you don't hire. And just giving an intro to Travis, I'm going to go ahead and read his bio here. So, and make sure I'm saying your last name right, Travis. Travis Cariveau. Did I get it right?
You know, I played sports my whole life, so I go with any of them. But it's technically Cariveau.
Cariveau. Okay. Yeah, I know you've told me that before, so I owe you one on that.
That's okay.
So, Travis is an executive recruiter with 12 plus years connecting top talents in construction, manufacturing, and engineering. Based in Minnesota with his wife, Michelle, and their 4 kids, this former SCSU baseball shortstop became a talent recruiter after a career start in machining. He helps companies find leaders who drive success while making hiring efficient and rewarding. Outside of work, he enjoys golf, travel, and family adventures. In this webinar, he'll be teaching all about the importance of improving the experience for candidates that don't get hired. So now we'll turn the time over to Travis, and I'm going to allow him to share the screen here, and we'll get right into today's topic.
Wonderful.
And I'll be watching chat, so if anybody has questions along the way, feel free to put that in the chat, and I'll pipe in with that.
Okay. Is that sharing okay?
Looks great.
Wonderful. Well, first off, thank you, Matt, and a big shout out to you and Krista and the entire Mobrium team for hosting us today. And, you know, your guys' work that you're doing, empowering HR leaders and amplifying their employer reputation is awesome. So if you guys haven't checked out Mobrium as well, make sure you check them out. And like Matt said, you know, I've had the privilege of helping individuals and great companies find the right fit for the better part of 12 plus years and across several industries, markets, and different stages of growth. You know, I've seen great organizations that really nail the candidate experience and others where there's some really big room for growth. And the most rewarding part of the job really is partnering with clients that are open to feedback, giving them what we like to call the answers to the test, right? We've helped hundreds, if not thousands of companies hire great individuals across all different levels of their career. You know, and we just really want everyone to win. And so with that being said, in today's conversation, you know, we're going to talk through 4 separate layers of this challenge. And, you know, first will be why the candidate experience matters. And we're going to talk about, you know, where the gaps show up typically, and then what causes those gaps. And then we're going to close with some practical steps to help close those gaps as well. You know, would love to continue the conversation after we're done as well. So connect with us on LinkedIn and look forward to those conversations. So without further ado, I've got my presentation up here. I'll get this going. So, you know, first off, why the candidate experience matters. Something that we talk about a lot is employer brand and reputation. Again, very close to the Mobrium team there. So, you know, the way that candidates are treated reflects how a company values people I've actually seen candidates turn down interviews just because of poor reputation. And you think of everything that's online in today's world with Glassdoor, with Google reviews, and with social media. You know, as employers think, they got to remember that candidates are interviewing them just as much as the client is interviewing the candidate. And so, you know, more than half of the job seekers avoid applying to companies with negative reviews. Again, probably hits home very well for Matt and his work that they're doing here. And, you know, a strong process makes candidates twice as likely to recommend the company to others. And in our world too, where we see second and third, you know, candidates, really the referrals being some of those candidates that we actually place. Imagine that on the application side. So the second is, you know, offer acceptance and quality of hires. I've seen candidates swing from a maybe to a yes, simply because the process felt respectful and organized. It really shows up in who you are, right? You think of a candidate coming to interview, they're supposed to be wearing their suit and be on their best behavior. And it should be the same for the client as well. So if you're in there and you have a streamlined process with great communication, that's how they're going to feel the rest of the company is ran. And so with that, right, nearly 60% of candidates decline offers after a poor experience. So they could be the right fit, everything could look really well, but over half of those would reject those offers just due to a poor experience, whether that be communication, process, anything along those lines. So it's very important to keep that in mind. And positive interactions significantly increase acceptance rates and long-term engagement. You know, and third is talent pool and long-term impact. A no today doesn't mean never. You know, I've had candidates reapply or refer others just because the process left a good impression. You know, Curtis on our team always says, you know, it just because they say no today doesn't mean that they're never going to say yes, right? So as we think about that, it's good experiences double the odds a candidate will reapply. Poor experiences spread fast. Most candidates share them with their networks and other friends that they're looking, right? So if you're trying to hire an electrical engineer for that example, and they have a poor experience, they're going to tell their networks, and then they're going to avoid applying at your company and or coming to work for your company and then sharing their experiences as well. So, and then, you know, fourth is business outcomes. When experiences is strong, we've noticed faster fills and smoother transitions with hiring managers. Candidate experience directly ties to lower cost per hire and better brand reputation. You know, and to put it in facts is it can cost a company anywhere from $15,000 to $35,000+ for the wrong hire. Really depends on that level of person and how much time was really invested. And you think of if you have a really long process, 8-9 interview process, and you have all of these high paid executives that have to be on these 2, 3, 4 hour sessions with this one candidate. And that's only the candidate that got the job, right? So there's 3 to 4 other candidates that come through. And so it's very important to have a good process, not only for your own internal aspects, but for the business as a whole. So, and organizations that get this right, they don't just win candidates, they win trust. And that's the most important part in this today. And so as we think about that, right, where some of these gaps show up, first and foremost, which something that still kind of baffles me today is the application stage with all of the AI and all of the technology that we have. You know, we've watched great candidates bail when the application was long or clunky. And, you know, 60% actually abandon a long application process, which is something to note for companies going out there. So today's candidates expect mobile friendly application process that's 15 minutes or less per application. The next part is the interview stage, right? This is where excitement can grow or collapse. Ghosting and delays kill the momentum of this candidate's experience. And that's a big thing for us is, you know, we try not to ghost any candidates and have a no ghosting policy, really, as our company goes through that. And it's showed a tremendous increase in candidates, even if they don't get the job. So that's something that is very important to us. And 4 out of 5 candidates say a poor interview changes their mind about the role. And so that could mean, right, on the other side, on the client side, you got to remember that not everybody's coached on how to interview, right? And so if your interview process is a little clunky and you've got 3 managers that are asking similar questions and then they're not collaborating at the end, that can be a huge, detriment to that process and that candidate's experience, right? They're like, what are we building in these conversations? I got the same questions from my manager as I did from the CEO. And so usually that's not a good sign for most candidates. And we've seen long interview loops cause us to lose talent to faster competitors. And it's a speed to market game as we're working through all of these interviews and these interview stages. So keeping that concise and really having a plan has been huge as far as getting the best talent, but then also retaining that talent too. And then a big one is feedback and follow-up, right? Silence is the biggest frustration. Even a clear no is better than nothing, right? You didn't get the job. Thanks so much for your time is better than saying nothing, where a lot of candidates nowadays are getting nothing because it's a little bit of technology working against itself because it is so easy to apply to certain roles. But at the same time, these recruiters and these HR departments and these companies need to take ownership of that, because those candidates, if somebody's not a fit today, they may be a fit for them 3 years from now, right? When they get their engineering degree or when they get their accounting certification or something like that, they got to try to continue to think long-term with these, right? And so most candidates say they rarely or never get updates through that interview process, which is also very concerning and very alarming when you think of the first impression that you're making to this potential candidate who you never know. They could be your next CEO or they could be somebody that is simply just there for the next year, but you got to treat everybody as if they're going to be there for the next 10, 15 years, right? And so when I've taken time to give feedback, even if it's a no, it's left candidates with a more positive feel, even about us and as a recruiting agency, right? So as an internal company, having that, even if it's a template, something that you can send out. But again, as we'll get into it a little bit more, personalization is key to making people feel heard and feel wanted. And then lastly, in this section here is offer and onboarding. A lot of times we've seen companies do an exceptional job in 1 through 3, and then they have a very clunky offer or onboarding process that really turns people off. The handoff from recruiter to HR makes or breaks confidence in the company, really, most of the time. And a strong onboarding makes new hires, and the stat is 2.6 times more likely to be satisfied long-term, right? They got the offer right. They gave me a fair offer. They had everything detailed. I didn't have to go back and ask, can I get a copy of the benefits? Can you tell me a little bit more about your 401k? Can you tell me about what the hybrid work schedule looks like now, or what my office may look like? You've seen these bait and switch moments where sloppy onboarding unloads all of that hard work that came up to that point. And again, when we go back, really to the business outcomes side of it, it's important that, when you're talking about, we just did 4 or 5 interviews and we got them all the way to this process, and we had all these individuals take time away from their busy schedules to make this offer, and then we'd fumble the ball on the 1-yard line, is always tough. So it's very important in those aspects. So as we think of, causes of the candidate experience gap, again, lengthy, complex application process, overly long forms drive people away. You've had other candidates tell you that, they quit halfway through the process. Hang on, I think that's and so as you think about that, it's very important that application process goes all the way through and make sure that you have what you need. Again, poor and inconsistent communication is very important. You've seen too many of these processes stall out simply because no one followed up. Candidates are rarely getting these updates, and some even wait weeks, or even sometimes in cases, it may be even up to a month for these next steps, right? Very important for that. Lack of feedback, personalization. Again, as we look at more of those, too often these candidates finish these processes and they never hear back of why they didn't move forward. Feedback makes them 4 times more likely to reapply in the future, which is super important. And from our own experiences, again, that short personalized note makes that more advantageous for them to come back to you or share with their network or really do anything along those lines that makes your company look good in a better light. Again, back to the Mobrium team, and the online presence that's happening in today's world is very important. And then, again, neglecting candidate sentiment and measurements is very important. Many teams don't measure candidate experience until the end, or really not at all. So that is something that's very important when we talk about this process, is getting that feedback from the candidate experience, whether they got the job or whether they didn't. We don't always want to gauge the easy wins, right? We hired this person, they had an amazing experience. Let's get their feedback and then talk about how great our process was. Let's go for the person that declined the offer and or left us halfway through that process, so that we can really understand what happened there and how we can make this better, right? So with these feedback loops, it's impossible to see where candidates are dropping out without those feedback loops. Apologies on that. So again, we've watched processes repeat the same mistakes simply because nobody asked the candidates what it felt like. And you see that all the time in that process. So, and then again, brand and financial damage from poor impact. So again, not only your online brand, but at Careers Launch too, some big things that we like to say is, we're out there marketing your company, and your HR team is out there and your recruiting team is out there marketing your company, right? That's the first person that this potential candidate is going to be interacting with. And so that is very important that, even your entry level recruiters that are screening those applications and sending those initial messages should be fairly trained in exactly what the message is from the company, from the top down, right? So candidates share their stories, good and bad, and you've seen word of mouth damage last for years, really. And, a big thing that we always hear from candidates is they say, I just don't like that I have to put exactly who I am on 1 or 2 pages of paper. How do I compile 20 years of experience onto 2 pieces of paper? And I really can't even tell them who I am as a person, which is a big part of it. And so your recruiters and your HR team, as they're going through that conversation with them, is also to make them feel like a human, right? You're interviewing them, of course, for this job and this specific piece of what you're doing, but you're also interviewing the human behind the job. And how are they going to interact with your team? How do they fit in with your culture? And so understanding those pieces is very important, right? 72% of people share negative experiences, and more than half won't apply after just one bad experience, right? So it could be with one of the managers, one piece of the process, the initial piece of the process, and other aspects of that. So it's very important that is thought of. And again, when you think of the business aspects of it, the financial piece is very important as well. So, and then as we think about it, practical steps to help you guys close those gaps, right? Is first is audit and simplify the journey, right? Walk your process as if you were a candidate. We've done this before, and have been shocked by what we've asked people to do. And we've had other clients do this as well, as we say, hey, you guys walk through this process and, blindly apply and see how clunky and difficult it is to get through these steps. And nowadays, with some of this AI out there, which I'll get into that in a later step here, but it's almost working against itself in that where, it doesn't humanize this process as we're trying to audit this process. And so keep those applications under 15 minutes and fewer than 12 fields, right? Again, you see all the memes online of, I just uploaded my entire resume and now they're having me type in all the aspects of my resume and my experience. And that still happens. It is so true. And it is something that can make that experience feel, where do these guys value, the candidate process, and what other processes in their company have they not updated because of this? And, again, cut the noise. Don't lose talent before you've even spoken to them. That's a big piece too, is a lot of companies, great candidates will fall out, and you'll never get that feedback either. That's the big piece too, is if they don't get in that conversation and you can't have a good conversation with them, you're never going to know why they fell out of that process. And then you're going to keep the same wheel moving again and again. Consistent and transparent communication. I know we've talked a little bit about that, but setting rules, right? Confirm applications. So whether that's automated or whether that's manually, confirm that you've received that application. Thank you so much for applying at Mobrium. We're excited to continue this process with you. We'll be back with you in 48, 24 hours, whatever it may be. Acknowledge those interviews the same day, right? So that's a big thing, is that, hey, you're set and we're set for 10 o'clock tomorrow, because you got to also remember that candidates are very nervous for these aspects, right? Where do I park? And, what door do I go into? What kind of questions am I going to ask? I also have to take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours off of work, and I have to have a good excuse so my boss doesn't think that I am, doing anything that I shouldn't be doing. And so confirming those and acknowledging these interviews and making that process as easy as possible for this candidate is going to help, right? And sharing updates weekly is very important. That's the very least you can do as a hiring manager or a recruiter on the HR team, is just to give them a status update. Even we don't have any news yet note makes candidates feel respected and heard. And we've found that, often speed matters more than perfection. Long silences create a ton of doubt in a candidate's mind, and they may be in 2 to 3 to 4 other interview processes at that time. And if they had a great experience, but they don't hear from you for 2 weeks, that doubt's going to creep in, and then they're going to prioritize these other roles and other opportunities faster. So very important on the consistency and the communication pieces. And it's also one of the easiest things to do, right? Because there's no skill involved there. It's simply just being a good human and putting yourself in their shoes and saying, here's what I would like to hear if I was in this process. And having that documented for your team is critical so that everybody can be the same across the board. And then that leads us right into humanizing and personalizing it, right? Again, they're not just a piece of paper. They're a human that has maybe a family. They love animals. They love to travel. Anything along those lines that's going to fit in or help them humanize this process and also humanize them in the company. So avoid mass templates at all costs if you can. Personalize outreach where you can, right? You can have a template that does 80% of the rejection or the next steps, but take 15 seconds and add in one personal note from the conversation. So, right, give candidates clarity about the role, culture, and expectations is very important. And then we've seen candidates stay positive about us, even when they're rejected, just because we took the time to explain. You'd be shocked at how many people honestly just want feedback about why they didn't get the role. How can I better myself And what was I missing? Did I interview terrible? Did I not show up appropriately? Did I not ask the right questions? So giving them that feedback and really giving back is very important. And again, humanizing and personalizing it. For me, I always think of, in these processes, I think of my kids, and if they were to get rejected for something, honestly, it's a good thing because they have to learn how to deal with rejection. But if somebody's helping coach and teach them who rejected them and not just rejecting them to reject them, I think is very important. So keeping that in mind is important. And again, as anybody on my team knows, I'm a very tech forward person, but definitely use your tech wisely. In this, I've heard horror stories of people applying and the AI booted them out because they didn't have the right keyword in their resume, but they were the perfect candidate. And nowadays, really, you have these AIs trying to gamify your resume to get past the AI bot, and then companies are using the AI bot to wean out these AI resumes, and it's kind of creating this collaboration. So definitely use the tech for what it's meant for, but use it wisely, right? Automation should help, and it should not replace the human touch. I think that is very important for everybody to understand, is that AI wasn't necessarily designed to take over every single role. It will definitely take over some, but it was designed to make every human better at what they do and more efficient at what they do. And so taking the time to set that up wisely, I think, is very important. And chatbots and schedulers save time, but again, do not eliminate those recruiter conversations. There's still a human behind that piece of paper, and you want to understand the story. And the biggest thing that I've always told clients too is that, we're worried about job hopping and we're worried about this. And I am very well, or I am as well, right? When it comes to that, job hopping is not a good thing, but usually there's a story behind it. And so just because somebody had some bad fortune or they got laid off from a company and they had a couple bad falls in a row doesn't mean that we should just look at their resume and then boot them out. We should have that conversation. And again, tech is great, but it's never going to have that same emotion that we just had right there. They're just going to say they haven't kept their, they've had 3 jobs where they've been there for 18 months or less, they're out. So definitely seen tech make the process more efficient. We use technology to this day, but only when paired with human connection. There's a lot of aspects of that are very important. So using tech wisely is key. And then again, always have to collect the data and move forward, right? How do we measure and improve? So send candidate surveys throughout that process, not just at the end, right? Gauge it. Every interview that happens, you come in and you say, hey, how was your interview with Bill? Oh, great, right? And you also want to be able to not just do that in person, but you want to be able to do that in writing so that they feel more confident to give you true feedback. And that's where too, even at the rejection or the offer stage, it's great to let them know, hey, feel free to fill this out and really show your true colors of what you're trying to do. Is, hey, we are trying to, Matt, thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, you didn't get this opportunity, but we would love any feedback that you can give us about our process, because we're constantly trying to improve our process and make sure that we're giving the best candidate experience that we can. So, right, and track these drop-offs, acceptance rates, and satisfaction, and then really act on them. Don't just collect the data and then let it collect dust. Make sure that you're acting on them and making these strides to really improve this process. And you've seen the best teams share results with hiring managers, so everyone owns the experience. Not everybody's meant to do interviews, and everybody has a different interview style, right? One could be very technical, one could be very dry, one could be very conversational. And so having those aspects and knowing how to manipulate them in that process so the best candidate experience can happen is super important. So from here, as we look at this, we look at some key takeaways, right? Candidate experience is business critical. It shapes your brands. You have offer acceptances, referrals, and profitability when it comes to your company. and the business. And again, we've seen firsthand how small changes shift perception and results. Again, same thing with your online presence. It can shape and shift those perceptions and some of those results. And usually the gaps are clear and they're very fixable as long as people are willing to look at that and or hear from a trusted partner of what is wrong or what isn't working. Typically applications are too long, communication is too inconsistent, and feedback is too rare. And then again, to wrap it all together, your onboarding is too disjointed. So once you've already got them to the 1 yard line, is that last yard is very important as well. So small intentional changes at each stage create a huge impact for your hiring process. And again, use practical steps that work. So audit, simplify, communicate, humanize, and measure these aspects of your hiring process. So we've seen this framework turn candidate sentiments around very quickly. Again, somebody can get rejected from your company and still have an amazing experience and still say great things about you. It doesn't always have to be negative, and we don't have to shy away from rejecting a candidate, because in reality, not everybody's a fit for every role. And it could be several reasons why that person wasn't a fit, and giving them that ammunition to help them further their career is something we as HR and recruiting individuals should be doing as a badge of honor for what we do every day in our work. And then, again, shout out to the HR and recruiting teams. We get to work with HR teams and recruiting teams across the country on a daily basis. And none of this happens without the people making it go around every day, and the work that they put in, and the tireless phone calls and emails and tracking down resumes and helping candidates with this experience. So they juggle competing priorities and make the candidate journey possible. So shout out to the HR and recruiting teams. A little bias on that one, but it's important. And then, just the final thought on that too is the experience you deliver to candidates today shapes the workforce and reputation you'll have tomorrow. So always remember that. And it's very important for people to have that understanding, and also the coaching that comes with that. So, and then as we get into it, so, happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. If not, I'd love to hear if there's anybody out there that has any other good stories, any other pain points that they've experienced throughout their time, or stories that they can share. And, of course, would always love to hear and keep the conversation going through LinkedIn and other aspects as well. So thank you. Oh, I think you're on mute, Matt.
There we go. How about, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Travis. That's some incredible advice and great information to everybody listening. We've got about 10 more minutes. So any questions you have, feel free to drop those in the chat and we can address those. I wanted to call out a couple points here. A big focus of this conversation was designing a better experience for the candidate who doesn't get hired. And a big theme that I heard from everything you shared today was you want the process to be the best it can be at every stage for everyone always, because you don't know who's going to be the final selected person when you post the job. And so you simply just want everyone to have a good experience. It's not like some secret magic template that you send to the people who got rejected to make them happy and excited and love your brand. It's that you kind of build up to that throughout that whole experience, from application down to, either accepting an offer or sending that no. Another thing that I would point out is these individuals that are applying, they potentially could be a customer someday, or maybe they were a past customer. And the fact that they applied means they really like your company. enough to want to envision themselves joining the company, whether they get selected or not. And that level of, I guess, admiration for your company should be mirrored with a great experience to help keep that positive taste, that good taste in their mouth, so that they can either continue being a customer or potentially being a customer, being an advocate for you. I mean, if you spend a few minutes to make a phone call, a personalized phone call, to your point, to keeping things really humanized, that's a small amount of time to help win some really good word of mouth advertising and advocacy for your brand. So those were just a few thoughts that I had.
Yeah, no, thank you, Matt. It's super important when you think about that, right? Because, you know, when you think of life, it's faith and family, number one, and then it's your job, number two. And so having that experience, and you're exactly right, from the very beginning part of the process, you have to be working on those rejections or acceptances, right? So you never know who's going to get that job. And so it's from the minute that they engage through your application process all the way through to their first day. That is really the critical piece. And, you know, again, it's not really rocket science on a lot of these things. It's humanizing it. It's making sure that we communicate with everybody and give them status updates and make them feel valued through that process. So, but yeah, great observations. And us as naturally born salespeople, you're always thinking of, you know, oh my gosh, if this person doesn't get this job, how do I keep me in a good light, right? And that's doing the right thing and making sure to give them feedback and give them coaching and help them land their next role if they weren't a fit for this. So you're exactly right. People go on to do great things, and they could always remember you by that impact that you made.
I totally agree. And we've got a couple more minutes here. I've got two more questions for you, Travis. So one question is, let's say you have a hiring manager who they're afraid of giving feedback because they don't want to say something that could be interpreted as discrimination, or, I mean, we should not be discriminating. Obviously, that's like kind of a prerequisite, but maybe they're afraid of giving feedback because it could be misinterpreted. What do you say? Like, what would you say to that recruiting manager?
Yeah, that a great point too, right? Is again, when it comes to the interview process, a lot of people aren't trained on that. And then when it comes to this sentiment of rejection, not a lot of people are very good at that or have had a lot of training or coaching in that. So first and foremost would be seek guidance from those who have done that in the past within your organization, so that you can learn from them. And then you can also get comfortable with that, because it's also not something that you're naturally going to be comfortable with. And then working with your other partners on these first few, I would say, would be very important to making sure that you've got the wording right, you've got the messaging right, because somebody along the lines has that for your company. And so finding that right person at your company would be very important to have that. And then, of course, you know, be happy to have that offline conversation if somebody was in that situation, to kind of give them specifics on that situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, you and your team obviously have a lot of that experience. So if anybody's from a smaller team and they need kind of some outside help with that, I guess the last question I had is, where could people find more resources from you and your team at Careers Launch Talent Group if they want just some more help to kind of continue this journey of evaluating their own processes?
Yeah, I would say, you know, our website is a great place to find us and connect with us. LinkedIn, we try to share as much good content as we can about processes and where we're at, and then connecting with us individually and reaching out. You know, we've got individuals on our team from Mark, who's a career coach, to Curtis, who's a prior executive in the space, who can really help people understand and have been in those shoes of giving that feedback and or helping a candidate with their resume and coaching and getting candidates going in that stage, and then also on the client side. So in short, I would say it would be connecting with us individually, and we're always happy to share these resources that we have, because really the best part for us is the education, and because the more we can educate clients on a great process, the easier that makes our job too, because now we get to work with clients that have a great process.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Yeah, and I would say definitely connect with Travis here on LinkedIn and check out the resources that they have on their website at Careers Launch Talent Group. And just as we kind of wrap up here in our last couple minutes, I wanted to give a preview to next month's webinar so you guys can see what topic we'll be covering. We had a great conversation today here with Travis, and then next month we've got Larry Salazar, who is the president and co-founder of Nest Steps. This is an innovative platform that can be used as a benefit to employees to help them work towards home ownership. So it's kind of a new product that's out there, but he's talking about something that's on everyone's minds, which is housing affordability. And if this is something that's causing distress to employees, and we know that it is for a lot of Americans in the background, how can an employer help solve that problem in a supportive way, which leads to reducing turnover? So this will be a really fun one next month as well. And then today's webinar will be the recording will be shared. So if you joined a little late, you can watch the beginning there. And if you want to share that out with the rest of your team or colleagues, as you found some really great points from Travis and the material he shared, you can share that out. So thank you everyone for joining the Mobrium webinar series today. And if you want help from Mobrium with your online ratings and reviews, Glassdoor, Indeed, those types of things, we help you with that. And to Travis's point about candidate feedback, if you haven't looked on your Glassdoor profile, there's a separate rating for the interview experience specifically. So I would encourage you to go check that out on your Glassdoor profile. And yeah, thank you for joining everyone. And until next time, we'll see you then.